welcome onto the stage Sophie Valentine, who is one of our regular hosts here at London Tech Leaders and is hosts all of our Women Tech Leaders events, which are fantastic. And Giles Lindsay, who's the most passionate man you'll ever meet about Agile. So can I have a big round of applause for Sophie and Giles, please?
What a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our talk on Is Agile Still Working? And I think...
Is it working?
Is yours...
Is it? Oh, good, thanks.
There we go.
It's now working.
We need to be able to hear you. It's not going to...
Yeah, no, it's not going to work otherwise.
So thank you so much for joining us. We've got about 20 minutes to talk on the topic of Is Agile Dead? To briefly introduce myself, my name is Sophie Valentine. I'm part of the London Tech Leaders crew. I'm also product lead at Anira Health. We are a new women's health organization, finally getting it right for women using technology, some of which is developed using small a agile methodologies. With me for the next 20 minutes is Giles Lindsay. So I'm going to read these because I'll get them wrong. For anyone who doesn't already know Giles or know of Giles, you have a very intimidating CV. So you're CITO of Lifeaway, which is a company that's transforming the rental market using technology. You're CEO of Agile Delta, which is your own technology leadership consultancy. You are a NED, a board member, president of the board, chair of the board at a number of really intimidating sort of agile consortia and organizations based in the UK. You're also a member of Forbes Technology Council. I don't know how one gets to become a member of Forbes Technology Council.
Invitation.
Invitation.
Or cost. If you want to pay, you can pay, but invitation otherwise.
There you go. Okay, fantastic. And you're also an author, as we can see here, of Clearly Agile, which is a book that was in the shortlist of the sort of business books this year, which is...
Business book of awards of the year.
Absolutely,
whatever.
Absolutely incredible and never happens for first-time authors. And he might be thinking about another book later this year, but I think we're not allowed to talk about that.
Not yet.
So follow him if you want to find out about, chapter 2. So we've got about 20 minutes. We're going to talk across a few topics. You know, is Agile dead? What is post-Agile? What are the mindset shifts that leaders need to be making? But before we jump in, let's take a couple of minutes. I would love to hear, who is the man behind the CV? What is your relationship to Agile? What's brought you here?
Okay, so hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. My background is software engineering. So, left university early 90s with a degree in software engineering. And that was my passion. Everything computers, everything programming was just what I wanted to do. It just so happens that the organizations I was working in when I first graduated were organizations that were looking into smarter ways of working, better ways of working in their organization. We all know Scrum came about October the 15th, 1995, and as such, its 30th anniversary this year. And luckily, I was able to start actually working with it back in early 1996. That actually led on to 97, starting to work with extreme programming and starting to learn about pair programming and doing all of those parts of the process as well. So really had exposure to what we sort of all know of agile ways of working pre any form of a manifesto. The lovely meeting in Snowbird, Utah of 17 white middle-aged men who arrived at a ski lodge for the 3 days and obviously created what we now know as the Agile Manifesto. So, early 2000s became a Scrum Master, early 2010s coach, late 2010s instructor. And as you say, I'm a NED for the Agile Business Consortium, president for the Business Agility Institute here in the UK. I've been doing it alongside my job for the best part of 30 years. And I like that because I often say to people, I either wear two hats or I wear one hat with two halves, that of an Agile leader and that of a technology leader as a CTO, CIO in organizations. And for me, I genuinely believe the education I've had in the Agile space over those 30 years has made me the tech leader I am today. Technology hasn't done that, but the Agile ways of working and mindset have. So that for me is where the power comes in.
Amazing. So he knows what he's talking about, I think was the takeaway from that. So let's start our first topic. Is Agile dead? Because I think we just saw, what was the stat? It was 74% of the London Tech Leaders audience, when surveyed, said Agile is still working for me. So, I mean, I guess let's start by, who is saying Agile's dead? Who's saying it's not dead?
Lots of people. We all see those posts on LinkedIn today. Agile's dead. They put gravestones on them and other things. When literally asked outright, is Agile dead? I say no. But, what we have today, I think in many instances is fundamentally broken. And that is where a lot of work now needs to be done to, fix it, change it, make it operate in a different way inside the organizational design. The sort of the rigid box ticking exercises that a lot of organizations have done over the last 30 years have been, partially responsible for ultimately killing it off. And then comes the certifications and frameworks. I mean, we've all seen Christopher Webb's diagram, right? The chap from Deloitte who created the tube map image of agile processes and agile frameworks and agile ways of working. It's chaos. And, that is pure commercialization of what truly was meant to be this ideal of a mindset with 4 values and 12 principles. And well done to those who remembered 12 principles in the quiz earlier as well. Forrester's report, if anyone hasn't seen that, came out, I think, in February this year. Their annual survey, their 2025 annual survey, taken from a lot of data, obviously, in 2024. But the 2,500 organizations they surveyed, 90% of them said Agile is still relevant to everything that they are doing in their organizations, in their workplace. And so it's really also refreshing that everybody who was surveyed here prior to coming here tonight, 74% said the same. So yes, you see all of this, hocus pocus on LinkedIn and people constantly saying it's dead. In some ways it is. In some of the ways it's, being adopted and adapted and commercialized, yes. But if we go back to the grassroots levels, it's not. It's still very much alive and kicking.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I think what I'm hearing is that the spirit of Agile is, or at least should be, alive, but it's been, for lack of a better term, bastardized slightly. And I'm sure we've all had that experience in our sort of working day of, why am I doing this? Why am I going to a start? I feel like this isn't really helping us. So let's move on. What is this idea then of post-agile? What do we mean when we say post-agile?
Yeah, it's not that somehow the movement of agile is dead and now we're in this post-agile world. It's about moving past the current constraints and limits that agile has today. Right. As I said, and I've seen this as well, you've got to remember 25 years ago, say, when their manifesto came out, there wasn't a propensity of technical leaders out there who also wore an agile hat at the same time. And it's taken 25, 30 years for the likes of some of us technical leaders out there who, have worked persistently with agile ways of working throughout their career to now be those people who are trying to mentor and coach the next generation of leaders themselves. For me, it's become very much part of mainstream leadership style, effectively. As I said, at the start when I introduced myself, if it hadn't been for that, I can genuinely believe my leadership style would have been fundamentally different. I remember I was shit when I first became a manager. I don't know here who had really bad CTOs, CIOs in their organizations, full command and control, full micromanagement going on, telling you what to do, giving you napkins with, things that you had to complete. I mean, it was chaos. And yet, because that's the only standard I had to follow at the time, that's what I became. I became an exact clone of those CTOs and CIOs that I was following. And it took me a good 18 months until I kind of did the needle off a record player moment, vinyl for those that is still good. Honestly, it was one of those personal reflections. And I thought to myself at that point in time, I've got to change. I now need to change. I got a coach. I started doing things fundamentally different. And obviously then I actually went kind of back to basics with Agile and started adopting all the practices the way it always should have been, without the commercialization lens, etc., etc. So for me, it's about not starting with methodology. It's about starting with adaptability within your organization design. And just, if you can make it part of your organization's DNA and you no longer talk about it, I genuinely believe you'll make it succeed even more. I hope that within the next 5-10 years, in the same way that, when we had broadband 20 odd years ago coming out, everyone talked about it. You're an employer of choice if you had broadband, especially as a software engineer, because you wanted access to Google and the internet to be able to learn how to do things. And it was really, really cool. You don't talk about it today. It's just an expectation that working practice is inside your organization. For me, I want the same with Agile. I want it just to be part of the organization's DNA ultimately. And so that it's not part of the conversation anymore. It's actually quite tiresome talking about it perpetually in some way. And leaders don't like it. I changed my sort of vernacular language, whatever you want to call it, especially when I arrived at the executive team and at the board level, stopped using any of the traditional Agile words at all, just started talking about business outcomes and value and how we were all going to collaboratively do this together. So, again, I just genuinely hope we're not doing this panel discussion, Luke, in 5-10 years' time. There he is at the back waving. Seriously, that we've kind of somehow forgotten it. It's just part of mainstream work. And I really do hope that the sort of millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Alphas even enter work, and it's just there. It exists. We don't need to do any more of these kinds of discussions about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's a utopic future.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
we hope we'll get there. And I'm keen to come back in a moment to the role that sort of leadership and the timeline will continue to play in creating that future. I'm interested in what does an organization that has embraced post-agile, that isn't doing the silly things anymore, what does that organization look like? What is the structure? What are the behaviors that we will see in the boots on the ground as well as the leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it's about the adaptability of it, right? I have got a sort of a model that I use when I go into organizations as the CTO, CIO, to sort of do a bit of a diagnosis. It's all in the book. It's called the CLEAR model. And it's all around 5 pillars of how the organization is actually behaving and operating. And it stands for culture, leadership, execution, adaptability, and responsiveness. And for me, those 5 pillars, getting under the cover of those sort of 5 pillars inside the organization are absolutely critical to understanding whether the organization is actually operating with agile ways of working really poorly somehow, or actually whether they're kind of embracing a bit of a new world order and thinking beyond the confines of traditional agile, traditional certifications, traditional frameworks and methodologies as well, and are applying some sort of level of adaptability to what they are doing. I've worked with organizations. I arrived as a technology director at one organization in the mid-2010s, and honest to goodness, it was chaos going on. I had one team who were absolute zealots. They were following all 17 pages of the Scrum Guide to the letter of the law. And nothing was being delivered. In fact, actually, for whatever crazy reason, the CEO was challenging me when I arrived. I need you to find out, last sprint, I hear that the team delivered, or 2 sprints ago, I hear that they delivered 30 story points. Don't even get me started on story points. I could be here for 5 hours. Then the last one, they did 24 points. Now they've just done 18. Do we need to fire the Scrum Master? And honestly, it's ridiculous. Yet at the same time, I had a team who had no formal training whatsoever. but my God, they collaborated and communicated as a software engineering team should, where, the developers, the QA engineers, everyone should just be doing this as a family in some way. And ultimately, they were winning out and delivering huge amounts of value. And we kind of rolled that mindset out across the entire organization. Ultimately, the 12 months prior to my arrival, the business had done 12 product releases with a technology team of nearly 130 people. And 12 months later, the same team delivered 109 product releases. The attrition on arrival was about 1.4 person a month. We didn't have a single leaver for 25 months because of adopting this pure mindset and this cultural change within the organization.
It's an absolutely incredible story. And I think that it touches on something really interesting. I think there's a theme that with Agile, we've the way that it's done wrong, there are frameworks, but we've forgotten, why do we have a framework? And I think we can apply that same principle of, why do we want to do Agile properly? Like, what is there to be won if we get this right?
I just think that we can remove a silo mentality within the organizational design. I just think we start removing friction within the business as well, ultimately. I've seen these types of organizations that truly win out when they are delighting customers, delivering value, failing fast, succeeding faster, got interdependence, not true self-autonomy where they go off and just create chaos on their own, but where there's a true level of interdependence going on inside the organizational design. And for me, that is where I see a lot of organizations who are embracing it, but without the need for formulaic frameworks and methodologies, and zealots as well who come in saying we do it this way or we don't do it any other way. Crazy. But the organizations that sort of remove those constraints, again, are adaptive to what is going on around them and constantly tune themselves around them, are the ones that win. I arrived at one company, and again, the teams, the people in the team were new. The products they were creating were new within the last sort of 12 to 18 months. The customers were new, and yet they had this existing agile way of working that had not evolved for about 3 or 4 years. And it was the one thing holding them back within the organization. And as soon as we literally cut the ball and chain off their feet, wow, did they accelerate. I mean, within 6 months, 5 times the amount of customer deliverables, just simply from removing the things that were actually limiting their success.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I think, we build tech in this room. That's what we do. Building tech is really fun. Sometimes you get into patterns of, we do it this way because we've always done it this way. But it's so important to remember that we're building tech for a purpose, whether that's business impact, social impact, financial impact, and remembering to go back to step one. Why are we doing this? I think is so crucial. So let's talk about leadership. What is one mindset shift that leaders, people in this room, could take from tonight, go into work tomorrow morning? What switch can they turn to do Agile correctly?
Yeah, I mean, we want this cultural change to happen in organizations design. I do a lot now, colleagues here do as well, technology leaders here as well. When we end up in these kind of leadership positions, we also end up in sort of a world where we start coaching the rest of the executive team, and even sometimes the rest of the board members as well. And our sort of tech leadership tribe talks about that. For me, it's, I still today in 2025 arrive and find a CEO who's full command and control. And, if I could actually get them all to change to sort of trust and adapt as a real mindset shift, I think organizations would fundamentally change, full stop. Have I used the word agile? No, I've used the word trust and adapt, right? It's as simple as that. And again, sometimes they've got to trust us, right? And I know, again, colleagues here, technology leader colleagues will say the same thing. You don't arrive in an organization with pure trust, but you've been brought in to do a job. And so they have to sort of give you a little bit of leeway, usually within sort of 30, 60, 90 days to actually do that. And then you've got to prove a point. And actually, more often than not, I'm actually spending more time with the leadership, because I think the leadership gap has been the biggest fail in the agile world. And as I said at the start, it's taken 30 years for people like myself, as a mere grunt of a graduate engineer all those years ago, to now be the grey-haired leader in technology in an organization today, to actually be the one to try and inspire the future generations. So yeah, trust and adapt has to be absolutely key. And if I can actually behave that way, and I know other members of executive teams that I've worked with have kind of gone, I want to behave like that as well. Look at the teams and how the teams interact with him and how he's interacting with the teams. And I've seen physically people change their behavioral style inside the organization because of that mindset shift.
It's fantastic. I think certainly the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Totally.
Luke is waving at me, so I'll wrap up with one final question. If you had one piece of advice, one first step that the tech leaders in the room could take when they go into work tomorrow morning, what would you tell them to do? Is it a conversation with the C-suite of their organization? Is it to go and read a book?
Please. Obviously, if you can buy the book, great. I only make about £2.10 out of every copy sold. So it just shows Amazon take 50% of every single book they sell. Who knew? 50%. I think the advice is I always say my biggest agile success is also my biggest agile failure. Going into an organization, changing the approach for the software engineering teams for huge betterment in how they actually operate. I arrived in this organization, it was like the Marie Celeste. No one said boo to a goose, because they thought if they put their head above a parapet, they would get one between the eyes. And we changed it. I still remember about 3 months in, someone from the finance floor coming down to our engineering floor, and pardon my French, she turned around and went, "Fuck me, there's noise here." And that's just genuinely the way that we were changing the culture in the engineering team, because she always knew it was this silent operation which never wanted to do anything. And so I only got so far in that organization because the CIO who I reported into at that point in time refused to let me go and take it to the leadership team in the business. And ultimately, he was pushed out. Agile was pushed out. They got rid of all of the coaches and everything else. And lastly, I was pushed out. And it's that same company that went from 12 product releases in 1 year to 109, to the following year, 260, to the following year, 16.
Very shocking numbers. So I think the advice is make a splash.
Leadership team.
Talk to your leadership team. Make a splash. Giles, Lindsay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everyone.